Well, are you right? Right, how's it going? I'm Grant. You're you. This is the Doodle Review coming through with a new album to give a spin, chat some fraff about, and then assign an arbitrary score to. Today, we're going to talk about the latest from the Voidz. If you've arrived here and you don't know them, the Voidz are an avant-garde art rock project spearheaded by the one and only Julian Casablancas of The Strokes, but brought to life by a proverbial pirate ship of great musicians. You've got Alex Karapatis behind the drums. He's toured with Casablancas back when he kind of was doing a fully solo thing, but also briefly played with Nine Inch Nails and a ton of other artists like Wolfmother, Perry Farrell, and Phoenix. Jeff Kite, also a solo Casablancas collaborator, is on keyboards. Amir Yagmai is on guitar, a musician working with the likes of Chaim and Devendra Banhart. And these three or four, including Casablancas, are joined by Jake Bercovici on bass, whose previous credits include contributions to Warpaint, and the enigmatic Jeremy Gritter, aka Beardo, a Frank Zappa-esque figure on guitar and keyboards, who, based on his solo stuff that I've seen online, is a definite contributor to the weird factor in this band. A while back, actually, when I first started this whole channel, I did a ranking of all the Strokes extended family of projects. And spoiler, I placed the Voidz firmly at number one. 2014's Tyranny, 2018's Virtue are, I think, some of the most interesting and satisfying executions of genuinely experimental art rock in the past 20 years. The band dynamic, especially a band that shares his passion to get really freaking weird with it, adds an extra level to Casablanca's overall vision. And for me, it puts this project to cut above his solo work. It's hard to create a record, full stop. It's harder still to create one that's worth listening to outside of the people that created it. It's harder still to make a record that challenges convention while still compelling people to listen. And it's especially hard to achieve the alchemy of experimentation, thrills, and dare I say, bangers that the Voidz have managed to do on their first two records. So we're going in with some pretty serious hype here, right? But sadly, and some of you will know what's coming, I'm sorry, but we have to tackle the elephant in the room. This third record, like all before you, has apparently gone down like a lead balloon, according to the critics that were first to the post with their reviews since the record's release a couple of Fridays back. Now, I purposely avoid reviews now because I do fear an opinion kind of subconsciously planting itself in my brain, or I fear actively overcompensating against that opinion and leaning too far the other way when I actually come to write these dumb videos. And maybe I'm a weak-minded smooth brain, but I'll admit it. I feel like it does have some form of influence. And it doesn't invalidate all of my thoughts, but I just prefer to go into these things as unbiased as I can be. In this case, though, Fantano's Not Good thumbnail found its way into my suggested feed. Reddit posts caught my eye, and eventually my own morbid curiosity got the better of me, and I did give and check in the Pitchfork score. Just the score, not the full review, mind, but I had to do it. And I was already listening to Like All Before You prior to those top line reviews forcing their way in front of my eyeballs. But the disappointing thing for me was not the scores themselves, it's that I kind of get it. There's an interview with Julian Casablancas from a few years ago, maybe around the release of Virtue, or perhaps older than that, where he discusses how disappointed he is that the current era of all of us having recorded music, like all of recorded music at our fingertips, hasn't led to like mind-bending genre fusions and a new paradigm of modern music. And I kind of saw his point at the time, but either things have caught up or I've discovered more interesting artists. But either way, I agree with that less now. Anyway, agree or disagree, I thought it was a really interesting point and a great insight into where Casablanca's head is clearly at when it comes to the Voidz and arguably even the Strokes, given that their most recent record broke some pretty new sonic ground for them too. Listening to the Voidz work through a cynic's eye, you could always level a bit of a glib criticism at them. You could say that Casablanca's interpretation of creating that new musical paradigm is just a combination of auto-tune plug-in and metal shredding shoehorned into yacht rock elevator music. That's not how I've ever felt, but if it's one thing I know well, it's the mindset of a cynical, sarcastic bastard, so it's easy to fancy dress that opinion from time to time. The reality is, though, that Virtue and Tyranny have both genuinely pushed the boundaries of what's possible with rock by incorporating, yes, vocal manipulations inspired by hip hop, and yes, slamming together aggressive and chilled guitar styles, but also experimenting with subtle Eastern influences, lo-fi bedroom production, and somehow infusing their Y2K meets 8-bit crushed visual aesthetic into an actual sound. And as I said, they managed to do this all while delivering actual bangers like Pyramid of Bones, Alien Nation, Pink Ocean, The Haunting, Take Me in Your Army, and the epic Human Sadness. Like All Before You, though, it is that cynical summary I just told you about actually given form as an album. It starts with the spooky mood music of Overture, which is not offensive on its own, but when you consider that the band obviously thought this album was epic enough to have this kind of grandiose intro, it's kind of a bit of an odd move. This is then followed by Square Wave, and look, I actually vibe with Julian getting his T-Pain on with autotune, but this one starts with the most dumb, incoherent comedic rambling, and it actually detracts from the song here. It does get better, but it's annoying every time I hear it. Like, dude, I actually think this project is great and worth my time, but this feels like a piss take. There are some redeeming features. The chorus is nice and soft, and I like the guitar bridge or the post chorus that keeps popping up throughout the middle. But the most frustrating thing for me is that it really just feels like an interpretation of The Adults Are Talking off the Last Strokes record. That Far Superior track captures a similar vibe with a very similar structured central riff that follows an up and down pattern. And I think the bass here sounds muddy and invasive and just kind of off. And I also think the song as a whole is pretty lazy. It's just a parody of a Voidz tune. Flexus later in the album sounds much better and is not offensive. The chorus, in fact, is pretty catchy. I'll give it that. But again, this feels like it's trying to capture the yacht rock but make it weird vibe of Endless Summer on the Last Strokes album, just with some more ominous Halloween mood music injected into it and a reoccurring lead guitar riff that reminds me too much of 1975. And oh yeah, let's just put some shredding at the end because did I tell you this band was super kooky and super weird? Speaking of which, Prophecy of the Dragon has been out for a while, and I don't know, again, the weirdness that, oh, look how invasive this metal riff is. We're so weird. Our influence is so broad. The riff itself is cool, especially that dun 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 dun, but the spotlight dancing, the look how weird of it all, to me, misses the point of what made the Voidz great over the last couple of albums. But okay, stands lower the pitchforks. I come in peace. The album has some decent stuff in it. I think spectral analysis is beautiful, like Casablanca's android persona taking on a moon-shaped pool era Radiohead type vibe. I love that simple progression and the way the glossy, glassy piano production melds with the harp and synth tones. And I feel like this is when the album is at its best, not trying to bash people over the head with how lol ruffle cakes random they are, but genuinely doing some cool avant-garde stuff. It doesn't compete with Voids at their most unique, see the Radiohead comparison, but that's cool. It still sounds haunting, captivating, and does enough of its own thing. Perseverance is another melancholic synthy beauty. I love the emergence of this really sensitive Casablancas refrain from the electronic soup and how it lowers down to this ominous lower register chugging. The shreddy lead guitars are way too dry and it kind of lampshades them being out of key or playing bum notes, but I'll forgive that because I do love the journey the synth and vocal take us on here. All the Same is another decent track. I really like the production of that acoustic guitar sound and how it blends with Casablanca's Android in Anguish vocal. The other ones I haven't mentioned are sadly maybe just a bit bland. Maybe I should shout out When Will the Time of These Bastards End, though, because that who's laughing now part is, a bit of a banger. Overall, it seems like Casablancas and the boys' obsession with chasing the dragon of how weird can you go has unfortunately seen them tumble from the top of the mountain of enjoyable experimentation into self-parody. All's not lost, and I do have hope for them though for the future. I'm gonna knock it on the head, but before I do, of course I've got to give it a rating, don't I? So look, I kind of see 5 as a marker on the scale of am I actually going to return to this and re-listen? Sometimes 6s are like my most listened to records because they're not challenging, maybe even derivative, but they got bangers or capture a vibe that I just like to live in. Like All Before You has moments like that, but I've also got to get through moments of sheer frustration just to get there. So based on that, it's just on the wrong side of 5, I'm afraid. So let's actually knock it on the head and give it a 4.8. That's just what I think, though. What are you lot saying? Let me know in the comments and check the description for some related reviews that you might like or be interested in. And if you can be asked to do all that, then may as well subscribe, stick around, share some thoughts, show some love, or just hold some abuse in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Right, if you're still here, if you're someone that likes my content and has plans to actually watch more of it, then this message is for you. I want you to email me, doodlereview.club@gmail.com, put the subject line as the video that you've just watched, and I'm going to send you something cool. The idea here is that I really want to take this community, it's a small one, it's a tiny one, but I want to take it out of YouTube and do something else at some point. I don't know what that is yet, but if you email me, you're going to be the first in line for it, and I will get back to you with something cool based on the review that you've just watched. Nice one. Take care, mate. Speak to you then. I know you go. Bye bye.